1. This incident took place about 10 years ago, or so, at my favorite pub next to my college alma mater. I had been going there for about 3 years at the time, and had gotten along extremely well with the staff. I'd stop almost every day after work to wind down. I work in the steel industry 4 minutes away. This takes place on a Saturday, and unknown to me at first, the exact same day a huge tailgating extravaganza is going on near the stadium for a huge rivalry game that is to take place in the afternoon. I had just gotten off work and wandered in and found my favorite spot at the bar, and as I sat, I started seeing more and more folks filter in. Older people, younger people, kids with parents, and of course, college kids. I'm around 38 at the time. Most of the older people and families stayed away from the bar to order food before the big game at the tables. Their pizza was killer. Most of the college kids started to gather around the bar, and gather, and gather, and gather. Within 30 minutes, the bar portion itself packed 3 to 4 people deep, all getting drinks and shots and whatever else they need. It's a madhouse, so with only one bartender, Missy, yeah, that's her name, and I think one bar back, they are getting overwhelmed. Then it happens. A full, fresh beer and shot are shoved down in front of me by Missy, and she says, "Mr. Majorly, dishes, now," before she goes back to serving the mob of college football fanatics. I glance down to where the glasses are normally, and it's empty, nearly 100%. I guzzle some of the beer, slam down the shot, roll up my sleeves, and walk behind the bar to where the sinks are. I'm pounding out those dishes through 3 different sinks. Suds and water are flying everywhere, and of course, that's when it starts. A drunk football fan appears.
"Can I get a beer and a shot?"
"Sorry, don't work here," as the water splashes in my face.
"Can I get some wings and a beer?"
says fan number 2. Talk to Missy, I don't work here," as I'm stacking clean glasses.
"Can I get a round of fireballs for friends?"
I'm now stacking 16-ounce wet glasses in a cooler to frost. "Sorry, I don't work here."
Yes you do."
"Nope, but I'm getting free drinks to do dishes."
"I need that gig. I could at least get a beer."
I don't know what tab is what. Gotta wait for Missy, as I jump down to the end to start more glasses. This same exact scenario plays out every couple minutes, as people wade in from the back to the front, over and over, at least 40 times. Finally, the game is about to start, and the crowd starts to slowly filter out after an hour. I'm caught up and lean back to take a breath, and stare at my shriveled up hands. Missy runs into the back to get some last-minute food order, and there it is, a finger snap. I look over and some young college kid is getting my attention, drunker than drunk. Let's call her DB. You can work it out.
"One more shot before I go."
I don't work here, sorry, I was just helping with the dishes.
"Of course you do. Just give me my shot so I can go, old man."
And she slaps down a 5. I blink repeatedly. Nope, this ain't happening. I lean forward from where I was resting, grab a double shot glass and set it in front of her, grab her liquor of choice and fill it to the brim. As she reaches for it, I pick it up and slam it down in 0.32 milliseconds right in front of her. She is just sitting there staring at me with half rage, half bewildered look. "You're drunk and cut off as of this moment. Take your money and kindly leave. I hope you have fun at the game if you remember it." As she was trying to speak, I just pointed to the door. Defeated, she staggered out. I finally got to go back and sit at my seat and relax. I never did tell Missy. 2. Was reminded of this little occurrence from a few years back today. Thought I'd share it. So about 3 years ago, I worked for a care home. I still do work for a care home, but I also did 3 years ago. It's primarily nursing care with a little dementia care. The residents can range from being totally independent and capable of going about their day with minimal assistance from staff, to end-of-life care, with checks every half hour to make sure there's always someone with them. The particular resident I'm going to be talking about here we'll call Dot, because she looked a lot like the EastEnders character of the same name, only with a Liverpudlian accent. Dot had a great sense of pride and a low tolerance for anyone who she believed was talking down to her. She was largely independent, just had a few funny turns here and there. I was working a night shift when this happened, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and it was round about midnight. My colleague was setting up breakfast trays for the morning, I believe, whilst the nurse was doing a few clerical duties. We had a nurse from an agency due to ours being ill. Agency workers can be a mixed bag here. Some are lovely, hard-working and understanding. Some are grumpy and uptight. Some will politely ask if they don't get sent again. The nurse that night fell squarely into the middle category. She would be snippy with the care staff, opting to do her work without any communication to us, unless it was absolutely necessary to hand anything over to us. Fair enough, nobody says you have to make friends here. And would treat the residents with a false smile and a semi-condescending tone, sort of like you'd expect one to use when talking to small children. Dot was going through one of her funny turns. She had put her coat on and was trying to barge her way out of the front door. I came across the reception area to find the nurse trying to talk to Dot, with Dot trying to get to the front door saying,
"Get out of the way, you miserable old trouts,"
to the nurse. The nurse was saying things like, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Dot, but we need to look after you here. I would be irresponsible to allow you to wander about outside at this time. You could seriously hurt yourself. Look, it's dark out." All things that seemed to make Dot angrier and angrier. After a while, Dot stormed off. I asked the nurse why Dot wanted to get out of the home. "Because she has dementia." Yes, but why in her own mind is she trying to leave? In her mind, it makes perfect sense for her to leave the home. What's her reasoning? She wants to go to the pharmacy. What difference does it make? We can't allow the residents out unsupervised for any reason, and especially not in the dead of night. I'll talk to her. No, you will not. I know how people like you work. You'll say anything to keep the residents happy, even if it means filling their heads with lies. Well, I was taught that we have to be honest with the residents. And this is true. You can't tell a resident an outright lie. At least not where I work. If a resident with dementia is distraught because their mother hasn't given them a phone call, you cannot say something like, "Oh, she did ring you about a couple of hours ago, remember?" However, it's kind of frowned upon to say something like, "Your mother died 20 years ago, dead people can't use the telephone instead." Honest as it may be, you have to learn to use tact, omit details if they could cause distress, and treat the residents with some modicum of dignity. Anyway, somehow I convinced the nurse to let me speak to Dot. The nurse said that if she sees me lie to Dot, she will file a report, and see that the home manager knows I am institutionalizing the residents, which is a very, very serious accusation here. We made our way to Dot's room. She is angrily stuffing things into her handbag at the time. The nurse folded her arms and stood in the doorway as I spoke to Dot. "Dot,
"What do you want?"
what are you getting all dressed up for? Is something special happening?"
"I need to get to the pharmacy. They have any medicine."
"But Dot, it's Sunday. The pharmacy isn't open on Sunday." Dot stopped in her tracks. For the first time she looked confused rather than angry.
"Is it?"
"Yes, Dot, look, here's your clock. It says today's date on it, and it says Sunday, see?" Dot made a sheepish face to this.
"Oh, oops. I suppose I'd better get settled. I do actually feel rather sleepy."
I left Dot to it. When I walk out the door, the nurse is stunned that I handled it so easily. She tried to sputter out that it was still filling the resident's head with lies for the sake of a quiet life. I just asked her, "What day is it right now?" And she didn't have an answer. The nurse tried to speak to my colleague about my behavior later that night. My colleague basically told her that what I did was the same thing she would have done. When Dot had her funny turn, she would argue with you about the time of day, how safe it was outside, etc. But as you got to know the residents, you got to know what kind of advice they'd be willing to listen to. Anyway, there's a time the angry resident calmed down and the grouchy nurse got egg on her face. Hope you enjoyed. 3. To kind of give people a picture of myself at the time this happened, I worked for the state dealing with public benefits and assistance, SNAP, medical aid, and the like. I am 6 foot 2 inches tall. I used to be a power lifter and I weigh 340 pounds. So yeah, I'm a big guy. The dress code for the state is business casual, unless you are working at the central office or a public-facing position. I worked on the phones 90% of the time on the day in question in 2018. I was wearing the one and only suit I own, being the size that I am. The suit is tailored. Now, this was a few years ago, and some things will be paraphrased as my memory is faulty. Few too many blows to the head in my youth. I DM for a D&D game every Thursday at a friend of mine's house. I was in my late 30s, and as I was leaving for work, my friend GP called me and asked if I could pick him up some new dice, as his 3 dogs decided that his dice looked like treats. So I hit a local game store on my way to his place. While I was there, I noticed a frustrated young woman trying to convey something to the owner. She was using ASL, American Sign Language, the only other language I understand other than English. I tapped her on the shoulder and signed to her to see if I could help her out. She explained that she was looking to get into D&D with some of her deaf friends from school. So I asked her some questions and found that they had never played, but due to the success of Critical Role, they want to try, and she is going to DM. I help her get everything she will need for new players, and she was just so happy that someone could help her out using ASL, and that she thought it was really thoughtful of the owner to learn. I explained to her that she had been working with the owner when I got there, and that I was just an avid D&D fan and DM myself, and that I was just stopping in for some dice. She looked at me confused and signed, "So you don't work here?" "Nope, just wanted to help, since I know sign language." We laughed. So, back to getting dice. That's when Karen strikes. She starts yelling at the owner of the store, wanting to know why the owner was spending all his time helping the cute young woman, but would not be bothered to help an elderly customer who just wanted to get her grandchild a video game. This game store does not sell video games. Now let's paint a picture. Karen here is about 5 feet tall, standard Karen haircut, and maybe 240 in weight and in her early 40s. If she has a grandchild that can play video games, some poor choices have been made in her past. The actual owner of the store said I help people that come to the counter, and if they need help with something out in the store floor, I help them as best that I can. Then Karen points at me and says,
"No, I'm talking about the owner."
The actual owner of the store and I look at each other, and at the same time say, "Lady?" He, does not work here. They are the owner, and this place does not sell video games. We smile at each other. This is where Karen explodes on why does a game store not sell video games, and what is she going to do now? She waddles over to me and starts poking me in the chest, ranting something along the lines of, "I should be nicer to older customers, and they're the ones keeping my store open." At this point, I pull out my state employee badge and point to it and say real slowly, "Lady, I don't work here." And you can go next door to insert big box store rhymes with Dread Myers, and explain that by state and federal law, poking me in the chest, she was guilty of assault. At this point, she sputtered, then slapped me. When I started to talk again, she slapped me again. At this point, I got ticked off, stood to my full height, and yelled at the top of my lungs that if she touched me one more time, I would defend myself and she would not like the results. At this point, the owner has called the police and has the phone on speaker. We all hear when dispatch states that the officer is 2 minutes out. She screams and then tries to slap me again. I catch her by the wrist, spin her around, and pin her hand to her back. I grab her other hand and holding both her hands behind her back and at arm's length, so that she couldn't kick me in the shins. This is when the police show up. Now, when you have a guy standing a foot plus taller or holding a screaming woman at bay, cops are automatically going to think that you are in the wrong. Officer 1, lady officer. Officer 2, guy officer. 1 comes in first and sees this and says, "Sir, please let go of the woman." I said I will as long as she won't hit me again. Karen starts going off on how I hit her and that she was just defending herself and that I need to be arrested. Officer 2, hearing this, pulls his taser and says, "Man, you need to let her go now." I let her go and raise my hands to head level. Karen spins around, kicks me, then slaps me again. The owner of the shop says that's the third or fourth time she has assaulted that customer. Officer 1 then places Karen in cuffs and escorts her out to the car. Officer 2 is a short guy, about 5 foot 8 inches tall or so, still pointing the taser at me and wants to cuff me. I explained that was not going to happen, as my wrists are too big for his cuffs, and he would need zip cuffs, and that he needed to call a sergeant if he was actually going to try and arrest me. Officer 2 steps back and says, "Are you resisting arrest?" I said no, but I will be exercising my rights to a lawful investigation prior to arrest. You know, innocent till proven guilty, and all that jazz, as I was then defending myself from being assaulted by that screaming harridan your partner just took outside. Now, if you want me cuffed while you determine what's going on so you feel safe, I fully agree to that. I'm just explaining that my wrists won't fit your metal cuffs. Officer 1 comes back in and says that Karen has been detained and is demanding a supervisor. The store owner pipes in with his side of the story. Officer 2 still pointing a taser at me, and explained that Karen assaulted me twice and was in the process of assaulting me a third time before I had restrained her. At this point, Officer 2 puts his taser away and then jokingly asks if he can see if the cuffs really won't fit. I hold out my right hand and he pulls out his cuffs and is like, "Damn, they won't fit." For everyone's information, minimum inside perimeter of the bracelet is 7.9 inches or 20 centimeters, when the ratchet is engaged at the first notch. The maximum perimeter is 6.5 inches or 16 centimeters when the ratchet is engaged at the last notch. My wrist is 10 inches round. Officer 1 and 2 are both amazed that the cuffs would not actually fit me, and that even if they did do my size, they would not be able to cuff me behind the back. At this time, the sergeant shows up. He walks in, sees me, and says, "Hey Rusty, long time no see. Hey Sarge, how's things?" Long story shorter, Karen was arrested for assault, and hell yes, I pressed charges. From what I was told by Sarge, this was her 12th incident for similar issues, but the first time she got violent with someone. 4. This story is from roughly 2013. I was an adjuster for Lizard Insurance, and would go to many tow lots after car accidents, and decide if a car was a total loss or send it to a body shop, as well as do the initial write-up of an estimate on repair costs. The tow lot I was at this day also worked with the state police and housed their overflow storage for anything deemed evidence and on hold from release. These vehicles were kept behind a locked gate inside the already fenced, gated tow yard. I was there to do an appraisal on 2 vehicles that had been involved in a minor accident. However, both were left unable to drive from the scene due to either multiple flats, lights knocked out, or windows busted. I finished the first vehicle, and I've started taking photos of the second vehicle. I have headphones in and I'm listening to the album Cavalcade by the Flatliners. Seriously, check them out. Anywho, I see a woman I'd guess around 50 walk up to the police evidence lot, and the gates swing open out of the corner of my eye. Not paying much attention as the vehicles I was working with were on the same side of the lot, but about 50 meters down from the evidence lot. As my back is turned to this woman I will hereon refer to as Karen, I take the last couple of photos I need. The last being a photograph of the VIN of the vehicle, which is located where the windshield meets the hood, almost on the dash through the windscreen. Hope this makes sense. Karen, out of literally nowhere, grabs both cables to my headphones from behind and rips them out of my ears.
Excuse me, why are there 2 cars in front of mine so I cannot get it out?
This lot was stacked cars in 4 or 5 deep side by side, and move them around with a small truck to release them. Please don't touch me. And I don't think you should be in here, and I don't...
You shouldn't be listening to music on the job anyway, or slacking off taking pictures of other people's belongings. You're probably back here stealing.
I attempt to point at the Lizard Insurance logo on my jacket, but Karen continues on,
Are you going to do your job, or do I need to call the police because you're refusing to give me my property?
Have you went into the office at ABC Towing?
No, I saw you here, and you need to move these cars so I can get mine and leave.
As Karen opens the door and gets into the first car, in the ones blocking her. Hey, no, you can't go in there, that is police evidence. I use my cell phone to call ABC Towing and inform them.
If you won't move these cars, then I will. Where are the fucking keys?
In the office, with the employees. At this time, the manager comes running out with one of those weird smartphone Nextel-style phones in his hand. Hey lady, get the hell out of here, those cars are property of the state police. The manager frantically uses his Nextel to talk to someone. They now see the chain used to keep the lot closed has been cut with bolt cutters, y'all. Karen was carrying a pair of bolt cutters and had thrown them into her car when she was back at it. The manager and Karen argue back and forth. I intently listen and half pay attention as I finish my duties for work. About 8 to 10 minutes pass and 7 police cars come flying back into the lot. The manager greets the police and explains what is going on, but not after Karen attempts to scream at the police that I had stolen her car. The police tell Karen to stand over in a direction he points, sending one officer to wait with her. Turns out the lieutenant was on scene who was in charge of the county's police tow licenses. After getting the manager's story, the lieutenant comes to me and takes mine. While I'm informing him of what happens, Karen overhears and starts yelling and attempting to approach me. The officer standing with her grabbed her by the arm. Karen yanked that arm out of the female officer's hand and shoved her, surprisingly knocking the officer down. Karen is screaming incoherently as she charges towards me. The lieutenant steps in front of me and, with his taser, hits Karen with the most beautiful sound in the world. She goes limp, and face plants in the dirt or light gravel of the lot, and skids slightly. They immediately handcuff her. Turns out, Karen had walked onto the lot carrying the bolt cutters while I was in the office talking with staff about the 2 cars I needed to adjust. She had been roaming the lot until she saw me, and I happened to be near her car. Karen was charged with burglary, 2 counts of tampering with evidence, assault on a police officer, assault on me, trespassing, and resisting arrest. I know she did jail time, but I'm not sure how much. Years later, the tow company I now own impounded her car for being double parked. She remembered who I was and quietly paid. 5. This happened a long time ago when I was a young teenager. Some background. Back then it was common in my city for teenagers to do a paper run for some extra spending money. You could do an early morning run for a newsagent, delivering national papers to paying customers. Or you could work directly for one of the local papers, delivering weekly after school. The local papers were free papers delivered to every address in the city, deriving their income from advertising from local businesses. Teenage me would never have dreamed of getting up to work before school, and would have thought of anyone doing so as insane. I opted for an after-school round with one of the local free papers. There were 2 free papers in my city. I'll refer to them as the Bugle and the Rag for anonymity. They were pretty similar but fierce rivals. I always considered the Bugle to be the better paper, but as my round was with them, this opinion is likely just because they used to pay me £12 a week, which was greatly appreciated. My Bugle round consisted of about 130 houses and shops along 2 streets near my home. The Rag was delivered on Wednesdays and the Bugle on Thursdays. This is important. I encountered a few odd demanding or angry people in my deliveries, but mostly it was just a case of trudging around listening to music and pushing papers through letterboxes with little interaction with anyone. I think it was a couple of months before I started encountering the object of this story. Janice. Janice had one of those ridiculous ornamental letterboxes. Far too small for anything bigger than a postcard, vertical, and with a knocker built into it that only lifted up 15 degrees. After struggling with it on week 1, I realized there was no way a folded paper was getting in there, so I resorted to leaving the paper on her doorstep. When Janice charged to the door one week as I was dropping off her paper, I assumed she was going to have a go at me about leaving the paper outside, but her true purpose was more insane than I could have imagined.
Is that the rag? It's late.
No, this is a bugle.
But where's the rag?
I don't know, sorry, I deliver the bugle.
No, you're the paper boy. You deliver the bugle and the rag.
No, I don't.
You do, and you better bring me the rag or I'll complain.
Sorry, I don't work for the rag. I don't have any of those, just the bugle.
If it's not here next week, I will complain.
Okay, great. Enjoy. 14-year-old me was completely nonplussed by all this. I kept wondering who she was going to complain to. From then on, Janice came out almost every week to moan about the rag and to threaten to complain.
It's outrageous. I haven't received it for months. It's a disgrace. I'm going to make a complaint if you don't start delivering it,
and so on. I tried my hardest to explain to her that while I was sorry she wasn't getting her paper, there was nothing I could do about it, as it really had nothing to do with me, and that shouting at the paper boy who did show up every week about the one who didn't really wasn't going to achieve anything. I finally sort of cracked it with her one week when I managed to shout over her. What you're saying makes no sense. You can't complain to Burger King because McDonald's didn't give you the Big Mac you ordered.
What do you mean? I would never go to those places.
Look, the Bugle and the Rag are separate businesses. They're competitors. They don't share employees. A guy in a van comes to my house every week and chucks 2 bales of Bugles on my drive. He works for the Bugle. He doesn't have any copies of the Rag to give me. There's someone else out there whose job it is to deliver the Rag to you. And they're not doing it. After this, she seemed to finally get it to some extent. But it didn't help as much as I'd hoped. From then on, she insisted that I must know who the Rag delivery person was and that I needed to tell them to deliver to her. Most weeks after that, for several months, she would chase me to chase the Rag delivery person.
Have you talked to the Rag delivery boy yet? I'm still not getting my paper.
I've no idea why she settled on this illogical and convoluted approach to sorting out her issue. Why didn't she actually do what she threatened and complain to the Rag? That will always be a mystery to me. One final twist to this tale. Although I never admitted this to her, I did in fact by chance know who the Rag delivery person was. He was in my form at school and even in my friendship group. He had the equivalent round to mine over at the Rag, got paid every week, and never delivered a single paper. He dumped them all and somehow got away with it for almost a year. Of course, we talked about Janice, and he found my updates about her hilarious. He used to say he was sorry for his laziness and causing me to be yelled at, but there was no way he could be bothered to do his round. He was just seeing how long he could get paid. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, number 31. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. A little shout out to give here. Shout out goes to the author of story number 1. That is Reddit user Mr. Majorly. Thank you very much, Mr. Majorly, for allowing us to use your story. And if you folks like the video, then please do boop the like button, and leave a comment, and, more importantly, share it with your friends, family, pets, your gardener's friends and family, your gardener's dog named Dave, anyone really who you think might watch a Hellfreezer video. That helps me, helps the channel, which, quite frankly, means that YouTube will then recommend the videos more, and that I can do this for as long as possible. Forever and ever and ever. Okay, anyway, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.